All right, we are here for our final video for the Unit 2 of Sensation and Perception. In our last video, we went over sensation and the sensation of vision specifically. For this video, we're going to kind of cluster all the other senses together, some having more information than others. Without further ado, though, let's get started right away. First things first, let's talk about some phenomenons and some strange conditions that can happen with vision as well as hearing. The first vision condition is prosopagnosia. This is a condition where looking at somebody's face, you can see the face, however, you cannot recognize who the person is. So you're able to take in sensory information knowing that this is a face, but you can't recognize their identity. Blindness is something that comes with damage to either the actual eyeball itself or the brain part, specifically the occipital lobe. A specific condition that can happen is called blind sight, which means that the person's eyeballs are fine, however they've had some brain damage, potentially a occipital lobe or something might have been damaged, that is causing them to be blind. Now, despite this blindness, they're actually able to still respond, such as flinching or moving or pointing, towards visual information, despite not being able to see. Basically, they're able to process some visual stuff unconsciously, even when they cannot physically and consciously see. So it's pretty interesting. That's kind of a interesting type of phenomenon that happens and shows that there's more to vision than just a singular route when it comes to perceiving information. Now, for hearing conditions, there's two major types of hearing loss. There's conductive hearing loss and sensory neural hearing loss. Conductive hearing loss means that we have structural, physical damage to our ear. There's a broken eardrum or bone in the ear. There's a blockage or infection, inflammation. Something is physically causing the inability for sound to get into the ear to be processed. Typically, people who have this might have a hearing aid, for example, to help assist them. Sensory neural hearing loss is a little bit different. There is no physical damage to the main structure of the ear, but there could be damage or an issue with the cochlea. Now, the cochlea is a specific part that helps us with transduction. Transduction is the idea that we talked about before, where we take energy, turn it into a chemical signal to be able to be sent to our brain. For this type of hearing loss, the ear is fine, but it won't turn that sound into a chemical, which means that our brain will not be able to perceive the sound. These individuals might have a cochlear implant, which looks like a hearing aid, but it has a small device that is attached to the back of the head that helps send the signals directly to the brain. Now, going into hearing, which is also called audition, this is our second sense that we've been talking about so far. So audition is another term for hearing. Think of audio to kind of help you with that. And how hearing works is sound waves. If you look at this image off to the right here, sound waves will hit our eardrum and they will shake and rattle the three bones inside our ear, which is the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Now, this big looking snail thing that is blue is called the cochlea. The cochlea looks like a giant conch shell or a snail, and this is the thing that does transduction. The cochlea turns these kind of sound waves into a chemical signal that goes to the brain to be processed. Now, we look at sound in two ways. Pitch, which is the frequency or the amount of waves in a wavelength. So a lot of waves will be a high-pitched sound. Less waves will be more of a low-pitched sound. Amplitude is the loudness or volume of sound. The larger in size the wave is, the louder the sound. The smaller the hill of the wave is, the quieter the sound is. So, for example, looking over here, if you look at these two options up here towards the right, this one red wave has 1, 2 hills compared to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the right side. What this shows us is the amount of hills. The one on the left only has 2, meaning that it's a low frequency. It's a low pitch. Now, the one on the right that has this kind of very sharp kind of wave to it is more of our high frequency, high pitch sound. I look at it like waves in a pool. If the pool has a bunch of waves chopping at you at once, it's high pitch. Where if it's just these kind of solo kind of rogue waves slowly rolling towards you, that's more of a low pitch type of sound. Now, amplitude is the height. If you look here to the right, these baby little hills are very quiet, soft sounds. Where on the left side, these large amplitude, kind of large hills are our loud sounds. So another example is if you look here at the bottom, this taller one is a louder sound than this one, which is a quieter, smaller hill. Now, when it comes to hearing, we have three types of theories that we follow, and we're going to use the diagram off here on the right to kind of help you. We have place theory, which means that sound frequencies activate certain places or spots inside our ear's cochlea. So think of this as whatever sound we hear activates a specific small little block or section of that cochlea. If we look at our diagram, that little blue section that we can see is an example of place theory. That sound is only activating that tiny little chunk of the cochlea instead of the entire thing. Now, on the flip side, frequency theory is the idea that instead of a small little chunk like this blue spot, the entire cochlea shakes and rattles and vibrates to whatever the frequency is. So if you look at this diagram, all of that red, the entire cochlea is going to rattle and shake to a low pitch or high frequency sound. So the difference is, think of F for full for frequency, which means that the full cochlea will shake, where P for piece for place theory means a small piece of the cochlea shakes. Now, this idea of volley theory is an idea that neurons will kind of group together and take turns in clusters, matching each other's frequencies and sending signals back and forth, taking turns. Think of this like a volleyball game. Your team and their team take turns passing the ball back and forth. You guys are in a cluster, working together at this time, kind of keeping a rhythm going. Same thing that our neurons do inside the ear. Now, our idea of smell, another term for smell is olfaction. Easy way to know that olfaction means smell is think of O for odor. So to make this one pretty quick, the process of smell is we have these bubbles, these odor chemicals that go inside of our nose. Now, inside our nose, we have a membrane that has these small receptors called odorant receptors. These take these odor balls and turn them into a chemical signal, which is transduction. So for smell, the part that does transduction is our odorant receptors. For hearing, it was our cochlea, and for vision, it was our retina. But for smell, odorant receptors. These receptors are inside something called the olfactory bulb. Think of it as just kind of like a dome that kind of has all these signal receptors inside, and it sends these signals to the hippocampus and amygdala. Now, it's important that you know these two brain parts specifically because the amygdala controls our emotions, and that's why we have very strong reactions to certain smells. Now, hippocampus is the most important one for this, however, because the hippocampus controls our memories and learning. So certain smells might kind of create a memory inside our hippocampus, and that's why we can reflect very easily on a certain smell, for example, of home or of popcorn or of a funnel cake, and it could bring back memories of our childhood, first dates, or tragic events that have happened in our life. So the big thing is know the hippocampus is connected with smell, which means that we have a connection between smell and memories. Now, this idea of pheromones is the concept that chemicals are released by animals and potentially humans that affect people's behavior around us. It could be used in different mating ideas as well as territory protection and marking with different types of animals. Now, this is how the smelling process kind of works, is it hits our nose, it hits all these little receptors, and hits our olfactory bulb that shoots inside our brain, activated in the hippocampus and the amygdala. Now, the idea of taste, another term for taste is gustation. Think of the G as gut, because when you eat, food goes into your gut. So gustation, the major types of flavors that you can experience is sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and two specific ones, umami, which is a savory, brothy sensation like MSG, or oleogustus, which is a thick, fatty flavor that you would have on like the meat fat of a steak or butter, for example. The part of taste that does transduction is our taste buds. Our taste buds take in information from the food chemicals and send them to our thalamus and frontal lobe to perceive and to kind of note the different flavors and aspects of our food. Now, there's three major types of tasters. We have medium tasters, which have the average amount of balanced taste buds. We have non-tasters who have less taste buds. These individuals have a very mild tasting ability, so they might really seek out spicy foods or sour foods to get a tart or strong sensation so they can kind of feel that flavor. On the opposite side are super tasters. These are people with relatively more concentrated taste buds than others, and they're extremely sensitive to spicy or sour food. They might be more of the picky eaters and avoid strong flavors of food because they already experience taste and flavor at such an elevated level. Now, it's a very short one when it comes to taste as we're moving on to touch. Touch at this time talks about the idea that our skin and the skin cells and receptors can help us detect things like pressure, vibrations, temperature, pain, and texture. And there's 3 specific receptors that do transduction. Now remember, transduction is turning signals into chemical compounds that could be sent to the brain. Thermoreceptors, like the name says, help us detect temperature changes. Some are for cold weather, some are for warm weather. And if they fire together, that can make us experience aspects of pain. Mechanoreceptors help us detect things like vibrations, pressure, and textures. Super sensitive, they're the ones that help us know when too much pressure is put on something. It helps us with things such as drawing or feeling textures as well. Nociceptors help us detect pain. They help us tell us when there is tissue damage or an injury to the body, or if temperatures get extreme and they start firing with our thermoreceptors to help us pull our hand away from a hot stove, for example. Think of an easy way to remember this one as no. Without them, you would have no pain. So thanks to these, they help us experience pain. They put our hand off of the stove so we don't get severe damage to our skin. Now, a concept called gate control theory is that our spinal cord opens and closes for us to feel pain signals. So it takes a certain amount of pain for the spinal cord to open up to send that signal to the body to experience the sensation of pain. It takes a certain amount of temperature change, a certain amount of pressure, or a certain amount of damage for us to actually activate this gate control theory. It releases substance P, which is a neurotransmitter that makes us experience pain. However, if we are rubbing a wound or if we're applying cold pressure to it like an ice pack, this actually slows down the substance P and actually closes the gate. So it actually is the reason why when we put ice on a wound or we kind of rub or put pressure on a wound, we experience less pain. It's because we're actually blocking some of those signals from reaching our brain. Our last term for touch is the phantom limb syndrome, which is a phenomenon with people who have amputated limbs where they may experience the sensation of pain or sensitivity for where their body part used to be. So because of nerves that are misfiring, they might feel a tickling or itching sensation where their foot used to be, even though they don't even have a leg at all. Now this could be kind of fixed when it comes to working with different types of physical therapists and whatnot. It is a syndrome that's very common for people who have been a part of accidents, who have been a part of war, for example, or different types of traumatic jobs or experiences. And our final slide for this unit is our other senses. We have kinesthesia, which is the idea that we can understand where our body is position-wise without looking at it. So we can tell how close our finger is to our nose, or, for example, how far our leg is to our body, etc. So knowing where our body is position-wise. And the biggest part of the brain that you need to know is that this is connected with our cerebellum. Without our cerebellum, we would not have this idea of where our body positioning is. I would really remember the cerebellum being connected with this. I can see that easily as a question on the AP exam. And our final term is the vestibular sensation. This sensation helps us with 2 things. Spatial awareness, knowing where our body is in kind of retrospect to everything around us. And most importantly, vestibular sense is our sense of balance. It keeps us upright, it keeps us balanced while we walk and do different activities. Without this, we wouldn't be able to stand. And how this works is we have something called the basilar canals. These canals are located inside a membrane of the cochlea. These basilar canals have liquid inside in these very tiny fibers. And what happens is if they shake and the liquid moves, it can make you dizzy. That's why, for example, roller coasters can cause us to be dizzy because of this liquid that begins to shake and move around inside the ear. So for this, just know kinesthesia is our body positioning and vestibular sense is our balance and spatial awareness. That is it for today. That is kind of the ending of Unit 2 when it comes to sensation. Hopefully these videos helped you kind of prepare and get ready for those exams. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.